Good evening all and welcome. Before the video begins, tonight's video is in the memory of Kyle King. I hope you are at peace. Tonight we have a selection of stories about truck drivers. They've certainly seen, and sometimes caused, some horrific things which you are about to find out. Disclaimer, some of these are truly horrifying, especially the first one, so viewer discretion is advised. Also, I would just like to say that the Indiegogo campaign is nearly at a close. We have 4 days left, so if you'd like to be a part of this, hurry. We have some really awesome rewards, including a phone call with me privately. So, be sure to check it out, link in the description. So please help us reach our goal, it would be amazing. We're halfway there. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This happened to me when I was 15. My dad ran a wrecker service for over-the-road truckers. Late one night, we got a call that a truck had run off the road and struck a tree 20 miles south of town. So my dad and I fired up the wrecker and headed south. When we came onto the scene, the truck and the trailer had run off the road to the right and smacked a tree head-on. It was one of those 100-year-old oak trees. This was back in the day when there was a cab over semi-trucks, or one of those without noses, or the engine is under the cab. The truck was still running, at an idle. The door was closed, but no driver was seen from the driver's window. The front driver's windshield was busted, and there was a large hole in the middle. The trailer was loaded with flat, quarter-inch steel sheets. Of course, it's pitch black, and we couldn't really see things that well when we first got there. Our impression was that the driver smacked a tree, hit his head on the windshield, and was already getting treatment somewhere else. So my dad set up the wrecker to the hook on the trailer, and he wanted me to open the cab in order to release the brakes. When I opened the door, I was greeted with the sight of the lower half of a body. When the driver hit the tree, a single sheet of steel broke free and cut through the cab, cutting the driver in half. The upper half of his body went through the windshield. I found the rest of him about 40 feet from the truck in a cornfield, and he was still grabbing the upper part of the steering wheel. It looked like he was frozen in time, still driving the truck. Needless to say, he went into a body bag with his lower half, and we worked through the night getting the truck and trailer back to town. This is one of my many experiences, having growing up in a wrecker service family. My mum is a trucker, and this is her story. She was driving through Arizona when she saw what she thought were leaves blowing across the road in the distance. This puzzled her, since there's mostly pine trees in northern Arizona. When she finally got to the leaves, she realized that they were migrating tarantulas, thousands of them. There were so many of them that her truck was sliding on their guts and she had to slow down. She stopped at the first truck stop and told her co-driver to fuel up, as he was sleeping at the time, because she wasn't going to step foot outside her truck after what she just saw. Her co-driver was past since it was technically his off time, and he thought she was crazy, until he saw the tarantula guts and legs caking the inside well of the truck. She also outran a tornado in the Midwest. She was about to pull over and take cover, until she saw another big rig that was parked on the side of the road get tossed a couple of 100 yards like a toy. She called me and told me that she thought she was going to die, and she wanted her last words to be, "I love you" to me. She pulled off the freeway and got into a Walmart, where she ran into the shelter, where all the staff and customers were taking refuge. After the tornado passed, they stepped out of the basement and into daylight, since the Walmart was destroyed. She has many stories like this. Trucking is 90% boredom, 10% insane stuff like this. I'm not a trucker, but a dispatcher. We had a driver who had, shall we say, an odor problem. I'm not talking like body odor like sweat. I'm talking like stale urine. Any time he'd come into the dispatch office, it was a race to have him leave again. The kind of putrid tang that would make you gag immediately and completely involuntarily, regardless of your best efforts. The driver was a rather heavy-set guy, nice enough but a little slow. We let it go until we started getting complaints from customers about the smell. Now this driver was a flatbed driver, meaning most of his deliveries were onto construction sites, job sites, steel and lumber mills. Therefore 90% were outdoors, and in the company of rough and tough dudes who otherwise wouldn't give a damn what you smelled like. We get a couple of phone calls a week from a job foreman saying that they wouldn't take this guy onto their site anymore because even outdoors the smell was so bad for the workers. We started delicately attempting to bring it up, trying to urge proper hygiene. He claimed he showered every day or at least every other day at worst, and that he just smelt like that and has had the problem for as long as he could remember. There was nothing he could do. At some point he had to bring his truck in for maintenance. It was a company truck. He didn't own it. But we don't rotate trucks, so we had the same one for months. Something had to be checked in the gear shift, so the mechanic had to get inside the truck. Upon climbing into the cab, the mechanic promptly did a 180 and puked out the driver's side door. It was then that the big piss bucket was discovered. I'm not talking like a Gatorade bottle or something that he took a leak in once, when he didn't have time to stop. I'm talking like a job site shop bucket, filled nearly to the brim with urine. The floor around it was wet, indicating that part of it had splashed out. The inside of the cab, I'm told, because I was too chicken to go anywhere near it, smelled like him times 10. It was basically pure, concentrated evil. The walls of the cab had a slight yellow/brown dull sheen. We fired the driver, using the complaints from the customers as the excuse, and then parked the truck outside in the yard, doors and windows open for a week just to dull it. Then had a guy with a ghetto-pieced hazmat suit, rubber gloves, rubber boots, mask, rain slicker, etc., had to go in there and douse the whole thing in bleach and cleaners. And yet, no matter what they did to it, they could not get rid of the smell. That truck sat outside in our yard for a full year, windows and doors standing open, rain, snow, blustery wind, it just sat wide open to the elements. One day a year later, the boss decided to close it up and see how it was. It was just as bad as the day they tried to clean it. He scrapped the truck a week later. This didn't happen to me, but my father told me last week about a few years ago when he was driving a road train here in Queensland, Australia. It was him and 3 other road trains, I think, and he was the second guy in line. Some guy tried to overtake all of them before the overtaking lane ended. This lane wasn't very long, about 1 kilometer, and they were few and far between along this road. Now this guy had run out of room by the time he had gotten to the truck at the front, and so he went off the road and rolled his car. The trucks all stopped, and my father got out and ran towards the car, which was now on fire. The first truck driver was much closer to the car than my father was, due to these trucks being a good 100 meters long. When Dad got there, the truck driver just had his hands in the air to say, "Nope, I can't handle this." What he had seen was the man still conscious, flailing about in the car burning alive. Dad didn't want to see something so horrid that he didn't look, but he was still haunted by the fact that there was a man alive 1 minute ago driving past him, but was now in the burning car that he saw ahead. The truck driver still has PTSD today. and can't get over it and feels terrible, despite the fact it was 100% definitely not his fault. Driving back from the road trip, someone tried overtaking my father again on that same stretch of road, not 2 kilometers away from the night before. There were police up ahead, and the guy was up to about 200 kilometers an hour just to get ahead of Dad before the lane ended. So he slams on the brakes just before he can get seen by the coppers, and Dad says he barely braked in time to not send him flying ahead, due to road trains having a much harder time braking than a car does. They get pulled over, and my dad abused the hell out of this guy, because he was still upset about the night before, and he sure as hell didn't want to see that again, and the guy acted like he had no idea what he did. I have never seen my dad afraid, but I could see in his eyes how scared he was when he told me this, because that moment terrified him so much that he could have been the guy who had taken another man's life so quickly. I hope that people can understand that trucks, especially road trains, don't have the same capability as cars. You should know how to act around them and how they work. And for anyone wondering what a road train is, imagine an old-looking, generally all-round gargantuan-sized semi-truck hauling 3, sometimes 4, normal-sized trailers at the same time. Yeah, hauling that much stuff, of course it's not going to be able to stop as fast as your 1994 Honda Civic. This happened in the mid-90s. I went on a road trip with my son, and for some stupid reason decided to take a different route home than the one I had taken previously and was familiar with. Turned out the new route was a super desolate road. I specifically chose to drive in the middle of the night so my son would be sleeping and there would be less traffic. It's probably about 3 a.m, and of course my POS car breaks down. By some luck of the draw, I'm almost right in front of an abandoned roadside market and was able to coast into the parking lot. The windows are boarded up on the market, steam is pouring from under my hood, and it was essentially the start to every single dumb chick breaks down in the middle of nowhere and gets hacked to death movie you've ever seen. All of a sudden, I see headlights coming around the bend. I had been driving this road for a couple of hours and had seen maybe 1 or 2 other vehicles at the time. A truck drives past, slows down, and I see the reverse lights come on in my rearview mirror. Deliverance banjo music starts to play in my head. The truck pulls up, so our vehicles are driver window to driver window, and I see the driver is an older man, and he is just staring at me. He looks like the stereotypical serial killer you visualize, with long, scraggly grey hair, grizzled stubble, and crazy sort of eyes. He motions for me to roll down my window. I'm trying to look anywhere but directly at him, and act like I don't see him and everything's fine and dandy. Oh no, I'm not in any distress. Please, ignore the steam coming from my car. I'm good, thanks. He backs up a little, parks and gets out of his truck, and begins walking towards my car. I'm thinking this is where my son and I end up as news stories about bodies being found in the boonies when the snow melts. And he starts yelling, "Not gonna hurt ya. Roll down your window." I keep looking anywhere but at him, trying to give off a strong, "I don't want you to mess with me" kind of vibes. In reality, I'm crapping in my pants. He gives me a disgusted look, walks to his truck and starts digging around, and comes back with tools in hand. Now I'm thinking, oh my god, he's got tools. He's gonna bust my teeth out and cut my fingers off so I can't be identified. He yells to open the hood. I'm looking everywhere but at him. He yells it again. He wants to know what's wrong. I'm so scared, but I reach down and pop the hood open. He opens it, and I crouch down so that I can see him through the couple of inches where the hood is open. He looks up, and we make eye contact, and I about die. And he keeps doing whatever he's doing down there. He goes back and forth between his truck and my car a few more times, bringing more tools, a jug of something, and something else that I can't make out. After about 15 minutes, he closes my hood and yells at me to start it up. The car splutters a little, turns over, and then seems fine. He yells, "Be careful, a lot of weirdos out here," gets in his truck, gives me one last disgusted look and drives off. My car made it home. My dad looked it over, after I told him the story, and deducted that the guy had changed the radiator hose. My dad pointed out many times that the chances of me being struck by lightning were probably better than my chances of some random guy in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, happened to be driving around with a radiator hose and the tools to replace it for whatever 10-plus-year-old POS foreign car I was driving. I spent the last 10 years as a truck driver, so I've had many stories to share, but I'll share the strangest. Coming out of Washington State Terminal, I was asked to take one of our drivers to Southern California. Not a big deal, I've done it before, but let's meet our friend Gibson. You see, Gibson here seemed very normal and cheerful and a delightful person to keep company with while talking your ear off. However, this all changes once the sun went down. Gibson here turns to me and says, "Hey, can you pull over for a sec? I need to ward off the snake people." This is where my brain doesn't quite process this, and I say, "What?" He repeats the same line, and here is where my spidey senses tell me that if Gibson doesn't ward off his snake people, I'm gonna have a bigger problem than this guy's cookies getting flipped. So I pull over and he gets out. Now, here comes the weird. He does the dance in front of my headlights, and all I can say is he certainly does his snake warding dance. Now, here's my dilemma. This guy's obviously a few fries short of a Happy Meal, but I was asked to drive his ass to Southern California. Unfortunately, I think too long about this, and Gibson is sitting again next to me in the passenger seat, as nothing has happened. I drive 1,200 miles without stopping, and Gibson gets to his new truck in Southern California, and I never give another person I don't know a lift. Ever. I was deep in Texas, coming out of Laredo. A Mexican truck starts coming up alongside me. You can spot them easy enough when you know what you're looking for. He gets up next to me, and no one is at the wheel. And then I notice 2 straps are on the wheel, and what I can only assume is the dude was attempting to drive the sleeper with a set of reins. I backed way off, and let them get much further ahead of me. I didn't want to die because of this moron. I saw them, 3 of them, in one truck. Later, at the border check on 35, they were in cuffs. I was not surprised. Idiots could have killed lots of people. On another occasion, I was running on Kansas Highway 96, out of Great Bend early one morning. Dawn was just peeking over the horizon back to the east. I rounded the curve out of town, heading west, when I see Bambi and the gang crossing the road. Must have been at least 12 of them. I get up in the middle of the road and lay on the air horn. They stop crossing, but they all start running along both sides of the road in the direction I'm going. I get back on the throttle, and just as I come onto the group, I see 2 of the deer on the north side decide that at that very moment they want to join the group on the south. Reflexes kick in, and I jumped into the oncoming lane to avoid them. I saw one's face clear as day, as my fender and door went past him. He didn't hit the front corner of my trailer or my drives, luckily. However, he did hit his head on the side of my trailer. It must have been enough to daze him, as I watched him fall and get hit by my back hopper on the side. He went under my trailer tandems where he exploded. I was over gross weight, and he didn't stand a chance. I pulled over about a mile up the road where it was wide enough to do so, as it was a 2-lane, and went to look over my trailer. I didn't see any marks on my trailer or hopper, nor anything much on the trail tandems. The only things that were left were a tuft or 2 of fur and bits of blood on the mud flaps. Rest in peace, Bambi. For the last 7 years, I've been a bull hauler, and I've seen some messed up stuff having to do with cattle. But the scariest thing that's ever happened to me was on a trip to East Texas. I had left out from around Austin and went up just north of Amarillo to kick them off at a feedlot, around a 600-mile trip. I was feeling pretty good, so I decided to turn around and come on back to the cattle company instead of taking my break. I called dispatch and he gave me a sale barn to go pick up and bring back to the company. When I got back, I was pretty worn out, but they told me that a truck had broken down heading to Texarkana and that he needed me to go and get the cattle. I thought, sure, I can do this. I made it about an hour from Texarkana on a little 2-lane Texas back road, talking to a friend of mine on the phone and trying to stay awake. When I fell asleep, I remember hearing my friend yelling my name and waking up to find myself in the grass with a cowboy on a horse right in front of me roping a calf. He roped, dallied off, and turned to face me. Just as I hit him, he disappeared. It was a hallucination. It scared me so bad I was wide awake for the rest of the trip. I used to think being outlaw made me a badass. I'd run 1,500 to 2,000 miles with no sleep and just call it another day at work. I realize now it was me being stupid and putting myself and innocent people in mortal peril. My sister worked about an hour and a half from my mum's, where she was temporarily staying, which was bad because she had a bad habit of falling asleep in cars. So one night that she worked really late, I made her promise to call me, and I'd stay up and talk to her until she got home. One night, late, I'm on the phone with her, and out of nowhere she starts screaming. She finally gets out some semblance of a sentence, telling me there was a girl covered in blood, crawling out of the ditch onto the road. She pulls the car back around and jumps out of the car and runs to her, the phone falling out onto the ground, and I'm still listening. I hear the girl start sobbing and telling her, "Oh God, no, not you, not you, I need help, they're coming back for me." My sister at this point thinks the girl must have some mental issues because of how frantic and disconnected her thoughts are, and because of what she keeps saying, that she needs help, but that she doesn't think my sister could help. In hindsight though, perhaps the girl saw my 5'9", 100-pound sister with her high-pitched voice and thought that whoever it is could easily kill her too. From here, besides the screaming and broken glass, I can only tell it from her side. That's when she sees this truck pulling up and is about to wave them down when the girl goes crazy and starts crawling and pleading with my sister to run. The truck puts on its lights and 2 very large men jump out and start walking towards them, making clicking, catcalling sounds. And that's when my sister's blood turns to ice. She reaches over, grabs the girl as there's no way in hell she's leaving her, and in a whirlwind manages to force her into the car and jumps in herself before the men reach the car and start smashing her lights. She speeds off, clipping one of them, and is followed by the truck trying to run her off the road for about a half hour. They only pull away when she reaches a hospital. Inside, the girl was in a panic and wouldn't let my sister leave her with the doctors. She keeps saying that she was her best friend. From the doctors, my sister learnt that the girl was repeatedly raped and tied up and dragged behind the truck. To add to the creepiness, once my sister got home, she looked at her name tag and remembered that she had left hers at home and borrowed an ex-employee's tag, Stephanie. And yet, despite my sister saying she didn't recall ever not fearing for her life enough to get formalities and exchange names, the girl had called her by her real name. My sister never testified, not because she refused, but because she was never approached or asked to do so. She did give the cops her clothes, and they did process her car. Turns out the police knew who it was. Once she was in protective custody, it came out the girl had dated one of them at some point. It had something to do with drugs. and then thinking she had told someone or something along those lines. Another crazy thing? My sister saw her working not too far from where it happened a few years later. I would assume that my sister would have to testify if they had caught them, but if they hadn't, then I can't explain why she felt safe living in the area we did. This is my dad's story. He was a truck driver, or lorry driver as we call them here in England. He used to work down the ports of Dover where we lived. His job would be to pick up one of the lorries as it was arriving from France. He would then drive it all the way to wherever it needed to go. He came back home from work one day, really disgruntled, and refused to tell my mum and I what was going wrong. After a while, and a drink or two, he confessed to the following story. He told us that he was driving his usual load. This, for him, meant leaving the house at about 4 a.m. to pick up this delivery. He was driving out, and just as he arrived at one of his usual pickup spots, somewhere just a bit north of London, he had to wait while they emptied out the cargo. I think it was for a supermarket. He told us he'd been here many times before, and that there was a little area for truck drivers to rest at. He stopped talking to the workers and made his way over to have a little bit of a sit down and use the toilet. When he was in the toilet, he heard someone walk in, but when he looked around, as it was still very early in the morning and he wasn't expecting to see anyone, he was surprised to be met with no one. That was odd, he thought. Could it be a female lorry driver who had gone into the ladies and the echo had just carried or something? He tried to put it out of his mind and finished going to the loo, washed his hands and walked out. He sat in the waiting area for a while, reading the morning paper. They always took a while, and it gave him a breather before his next load. Right as he was reading, he heard footsteps coming out of the toilet. He didn't want to look over, feeling it would be nosy, but knowing that they would have to come through this way and would either sit in the lounge area or go through the front door, he waited to see who it was who appeared. But there was no one. At this point, he started to feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, and so he shouted out into the emptiness, "Is anyone here?" But was met with silence. So he walked into the men's and pushed open the 2 stall doors. He was met with nothing but grotty toilets. There was nowhere to hide here. It was completely vacant. So he shouted into the ladies. Being the gentleman he was, he didn't really want to risk going in. But when he received no reply, and considering the hour it was, he decided to venture in. He pushed open all 3 stall doors and was met with nothing. It was empty. The first rays of sunlight were just coming in the morning, and he looked around, stricken. He promptly walked out of there and back to where they were unpacking his lorry. He started talking with one of the guys working as a way to distract himself, telling himself he hadn't seen anything. But the terror was written all over his face, and after a little while one of the workers asked what was wrong. He didn't really know what to say. He just said he had a stomachache. But one of the workers caught on quick that there was a bit more that he wasn't saying, and pressed on, saying he looked perfectly fine before he went into the little hut. Then, after a little bit of coaxing, he confessed that he thought he may have heard someone go in, and asked if it was any of them. Then, all of them simultaneously burst out into laughter, and asked if he had heard footsteps. He nodded solemnly, and they confirmed that when they use the restroom in that area while unpacking, that they sometimes do hear phantom footsteps, but find no body making them. That's about it as far as the ghost story goes. He did have to make return visits as part of his job, but you can bet your bottom dollar that he never walked into that rest area again. He always asked to use the employee loo inside, and as he knew most of the folk there quite well, they didn't hold it against him. But when he came home that day, He was definitely shaken up, and it took him a good while and a few drinks before he could even go to sleep. I was a long-haul truck driver for a few years, and just spending every day out on the road is pretty crazy. You see a lot through the windshield of trucks. A lot of people naturally assume that truckers are male, and for some reason women will flash you a lot. One thing that I did see that sticks out with me are the amount of deceased you see. There was a bad accident one night in Chicago, and it was late, rainy, and the interstate by Wrigley Field, and I could see the flashing lights in the opposite lane. I don't usually rubberneck because I don't want to see other people's misfortune, but this time I did. There was a dead family lying broken on the road, and the first response were pretty much just standing around waiting for the coroner to arrive. I can still see the flashing lights in the rain, and the little, dead child lying 30 feet away from its parents. I wish I'd never looked. Perhaps you wish you'd have never heard it. Another time, near Chicago, probably around Gary, I saw a possible drunk driver in a fancy car driving erratically on the interstate. I called the police and gave them the mile marker so that they could try and stop it. I lost sight of the car as it sped off, but a few miles down the road it was flipped over on the other side of the free lane engulfed in flames. I don't think the driver made it out. There was no one standing beside it. One night in northern Ontario, I was climbing a hill on a single lane, and I was just cresting the top when I see a minivan coming straight at me in my lane, and a long line of cars that they are passing on the other. I have nowhere to go, and I'm not allowed to leave my lane of traffic, even if it means killing you. So I hit the brakes, even managing to lean forward and grab the trailer spike to use all the brakes, knowing two things. I'm about to end someone's life in this minivan, and that I'm about to be covered in 1,000 gallons of horse piss that I was hauling in this trailer. Luckily, the stupid minivan was able to get back in the other lane when the other vehicles started hitting their brakes to avoid the incident that was about to happen. Things like that, I remember. Nearly dying in accidents, nearly killing people as they cut you off, not realizing how long it takes for a truck to stop. There are good days to driving, but the bad ones were the reasons I quit. I'm a long-haul truck driver, so I'm no stranger to the States, and I've seen things that I can't explain, but this is by far the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. I was driving through Arizona heading westbound on I-40. I'd finally hit Flagstaff and get out at a truck stop and handled my business. As I left Flagstaff, I ran by mile marker 185. It's about 10 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona, and as I passed it, there was what seemed to be a person hitchhiking. The only problem was, this guy was huge, about 8 feet tall, and looked straight into the passenger window of my semi. On top of that, it seemed to be as wide as the truck from shoulder to shoulder. I passed the hitchhiker at 70 miles an hour, or so I thought. About half a mile down the road, I saw the exact same person or thing. Once again I passed it, but once again, this kept happening every 20 miles down the road to mile marker 165. I saw it every few miles. After I passed mile marker 165, I didn't see it anymore, so I thought I was done with it. But I was dead wrong. I got down to mile marker 145 and had to take a leak, so I pulled over to the side of the road to handle my business. I was about halfway done when I heard an ear-piercing scream mix between what sounded like a deer and a human. As soon as I heard it, I started looking around, and just outside the halo of my headlights, I saw it. I was never more confused and scared in my life. I tried to figure out what it was when I heard something fly through the air. Suddenly, I heard a thump, and sitting 3 feet away from me was a huge rock, roughly the size of a small basketball. It had to have weighed at least 80 pounds, and it landed a mere 3 feet away. I wasted no time trying to hop back into the truck and get away from whatever that thing was. As I passed it, it just stared me down, and I never saw it again. Can someone, please, tell me what I saw? To give some context, I'm a 16-year-old male and go to Ephraim, Utah every summer to do drum corps, and it usually lasts all summer. If you're not familiar with drum corps, it's just basically professional marching band. We stayed on a college campus and had 3 days every Sunday to get to know the people and just relax before we had to go rehearse the next week. This took place last summer. This particular Sunday night, my section wanted to go stargazing, since there's really nothing else to do in middle of nowhere Utah. People recommended we go to the softball field that was a little walk away from where we were staying. We all agreed to go there that night and planned on being there around 9:30 p.m. However, me and someone else from my room volunteered to go and get snacks since we were planning on being there for a few hours. We started walking to the nearest gas station to get some chips and soda for the rest of the group. When about halfway there, we noticed a strange white truck with its lights on parked right next to the sidewalk. It was too dark to see the driver, but we thought nothing of it, even if it was a bit unusual at this hour. We got the chips and sodas and began to head to the softball field. It was quite a walk from the gas station, so we were prepared to be walking for at least 15 minutes. When we were not even halfway there, we saw the same truck again, only this time it was parked on the opposite side of the street with its lights still on. It was about then when we started to get a little suspicious. It appeared to be following us, so we began to pick up the pace. We walked for a while and turned around to look to see if it was still following us, but it was nowhere in sight. Then, we started laughing to ourselves for being so worried when it was probably nothing. But, when we were about halfway there, just as we were passing a bell tower right next to a parking lot, it was then we saw the headlights again, but this time he was driving pretty fast towards the sidewalk. Me and my friend didn't really know what to do, so we kind of just stared at it until it actually drove onto the sidewalk and nearly hit the bell tower. At this point we started sprinting, but the truck wasn't far behind. We took a shortcut to another side of the sidewalk, one we were sure the truck couldn't get to. We ran the rest of the way back to the softball field without even looking back. When we got there, we told the other people in our section, and they told the staff the next morning, but nothing was really done about it, since the only proof of the truck on the sidewalk were the tire marks. I still don't know what he wanted from us, or if I was just overreacting, but either way it still kind of spooked me. I didn't see that white truck ever again, and I hope I never have to. I was in the mall, Crossgates. It was a pretty large place and I was 13 at the time, being 30 now, so it was a while ago. My mum was cashing out in Lord & Taylor, and me being such a cool person wanted to hang in the car. My mum, after some coaxing, begrudgingly gave me the key to sit in the car and listen to music. There were only a couple of people ahead of her in line. It was early evening, and the sunlight was still creeping between the clouds, and the sky was warm. It was summer. I walked to the car, but I felt off. I could hear a car behind me, but it was a parking lot, so that was useful. When I see this big truck, they pulled up in front of me. The back was open, which I thought was odd. It was a huge U-Haul, and it was empty. A man was in the back of the U-Haul. He asked me to show them, the three men, where the Hooters was. Now, anyone familiar with this mall at the time knows perfectly well you can see Hooters from the lot I'm sitting at. Their bright orange sign says it all. I pointed in the direction, mentioning it that you could see it from here. He asked me to get in the truck, the big, empty hole in the back, so that I could show them where it was. I was kind of stuck. You see, there were 3 of them. Why the hell would I get in the back of a box truck? You couldn't even see the driver. I was speechless. All my fears rushed back to me from my childhood. Out of nowhere, I could hear keys being jingled from behind me. Some man, an older man, probably in his 50s, came running up to me, pretended he was my father, and told them to get off and that I was his daughter. They drove away pretty quickly, not really listening to what he said. I still wonder what would have happened if he hadn't have helped me out. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so very much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. If of course you did, be sure to let me know down below. I always appreciate it. As I said at the start of the video, I would seriously appreciate it even more if you guys would check out the link to my Indiegogo campaign. We are funding the creation of the Mortis Media app. Well, it's already made. Actually, it's just kind of like server space and improving some stuff. And if you would like to be a part of it, it would be seriously appreciated. So thank you, any and all who would like to be a part of it. I am looking forward to hopefully having you on board. You also get some really cool perks for signing up, so, think about it. Alright then, guys. I'm going to leave that there for you to, consider. Only a few days left to join. Said that. Sorry, I'm feeling really forgetful right now. I'd like to also extend a huge thanks to my members, patrons, and coffee supporters whose names can be seen on screen. And yeah, welcome to November. I hope that you have a great month ahead. It's Thanksgiving in the next few weeks for all my American friends. And yeah, should I do some Thanksgiving stories this year? We'll have a little think about it. I'm going to wrap things up here, though. I am tired. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thank you.